Hello there, sixth graders. Today we're taking a look at the opposite of a number, lesson 4, and it is on page 31 of your book, 31. And as we take a look at this, the first thing I want to ask you is, if I said to you, give me the opposite of hot, what would you say? Cold, right? What if I said up? Hopefully you said down. What if I said apart? Together? And what if I said question? You would say answer. Those are all opposites, right? So as I'm taking a look at opposite when it comes to numbers, we're looking at a little bit of difference, okay? It's very similar to our words, but it's a little different, okay? So our target goals are that you'll be able to understand that non-zero integers, so as long as it's not a zero, it has an opposite. And we can write that as a negative A. We can write the positive as just an A. And they are opposites. And they're on opposite sides of the number 0. They're also the same distance from 0. So you will know that 0 is its own opposite. And you'll know that that since all counting numbers are positive, it is not necessary to indicate it with a plus sign. So you don't have to use that plus sign. So let's go ahead and we're going to take a look at example 1. Again, we're on page 31. And it says locate. No, it doesn't. It says each integer has an opposite denoted A or negative A. And negative A and A are opposites if they're on opposite sides of 0 and the same distance from 0 on the number line. Locate the number 8 and its opposite on the number line and explain how they're related to 0. So the first thing I need to do is I need to plot those points. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to find my 8 and I'm going to plot it. And then I'm going to go to its opposite. So instead of positive 8, I'm going to go to negative 8. So I located the first one. I did its opposite. Explain how they're related to 0. Well, I know that 8 is 8 units from 0. And negative 8 is 8 units from 0. So they are both 8 units from 0, but on opposite sides. Number 2 says, locate and label the opposites of the numbers on the number line. So my first one is 9. Does it tell me to label or to plot 9? Just the opposites, right? So what's the opposite of positive 9? Negative 9. And that was letter A, so I label it A. What's the opposite of negative 2? Positive 2, right? So I go to positive 2, and I label it B. I then look at my number 4. What's the opposite of a positive 4? Negative 4. And that is letter C. And my final one is a negative 7. Opposite of negative 7 is positive 7. And that would be letter D. Number 3 says, write an integer that represents the opposite of each situation. Then explain what 0 means in this situation. This is what we have talked about before. This is probably the most difficult part or the part that people skip. So we want the opposite of what's going on and then explain what 0 means. So if this is 50 feet above sea level, is that a positive or a negative? Right, it's positive, right? So if this is positive, what's the opposite? Negative 100. And then we need, what does 0 represent? Well, in this case, 0 is sea level. All right, let's look at the B. 32 degrees below. Below means it's negative, right? So negative 32. What's the opposite of that? positive 32. And what does 0 represent? It represents 0 degrees Celsius. So 0 represents 0 degrees Celsius. A withdraw of 25. What did we say withdraw meant? Good, that we're taking it out, right? So it's a negative 25. So what's the opposite? Positive 25. And what would 0 mean? 0 means no change in the balance, no change. Or no withdrawal. Example 2, real world. Maria decides to take a walk along Central Avenue to purchase a book at the bookstore. On her way, she passes the Furry Friends pet shop and goes in to look for a new leash for her dog. Furry Friends pet shop is 7 blocks west of the bookstore. She leaves Furry Friends pet shop and walks towards the bookstore to look at some books. After she leaves the bookstore, she heads east for 7 blocks and stops at Ray's pet shop to see if she can find a new leash at a better price. Which location, if any, is the furthest from Maria while she is at the bookstore? So, what do we need to do here? Well, we're going to have to figure out what we're even talking about. So, where are we starting? All right, a bookstore. So I'm going to go ahead and put the bookstore right here at 0. Okay, I'm going to say that's the bookstore. And then it says, on her way, she passes, wait a sec, right here, 7 blocks west of the bookstore is Furry Friends. Well, if we remember our nobody eats soggy waffles, here is west. So we're going to go west 7. So I'm going to have to number these. Ready? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There we go. All right, and I'm going to plot my negative 7 because I went 7 blocks, and that is Furry Friends. And then it says she heads, after she leaves her bookstore, okay, she heads east for 7 blocks and stops at Ray's. So she went 7 blocks because she left here, okay, she was walking. On her way, she passed Furry Friends. So here she is walking. She passes Furry Friends. And we know that that was 7 blocks west of the bookstore. So we knew from here to here was 7. She continued. She went in, she was at the bookstore. Then when she left, she went 7 blocks east. So now she went 7 east. So now she's right here. And that is Ray's. Now the question says, which location, if any, is furthest from her while she's at the bookstore? Well, how far is she from the bookstore right here? 7, right? So that 7 is the exact same as when she was at Furry Friends. So is it any different? Which location? They're both the same. And then it says, explain your answer and what does the 0 mean? They are both the same distance. I'm going to go ahead and write here 7 blocks. From the bookstore. And what does 0 represent? 0 is, what is it? The bookstore. And we're done. Let me think. Are we? All right, ready? Number 4. Read each situation carefully and answer the questions. On a number line, locate and label a credit of 15 and a debit for the same amount from a bank account, and then tell what 0 represents. So if we have to have a credit of 15, a debit of 15, and represent what 0 means. So we're going to have 0 here. And then whatever we want to count by, 5, 10, 15, -5, -10, -15. A credit. Is credit positive or negative? Positive, right? So positive 15. Here is our credit. And our debit for the same thing. Here's our debit. It's like owing, our debt. So what does 0 represent in this situation? No change in our balance or the balance. Nothing changed about it. Number 5, on a number line, locate and label 20 degrees below 0 and 20 degrees above 0. And what does 0 represent? What do we want to count by here? Well, they don't give me enough lines for me to count by 5, so that must be too small, right? What about 10s? 10s would work. If I put a 0, 10, 20, and -10, -20. And we're going to go ahead and plot 20 degrees below. Below means negative. And then we're going to have 20 degrees above. And then what does 0 represent? 0 represents 0 degrees Celsius, because we're talking about temperatures here. We have one more problem. A proton represents a positive charge. It tells us that. Proton is positive. Write an integer to represent 5 protons. 5 of them. How are you going to write it? Right, plus 5, or just 5. An electron represents a negative charge. Write an integer to represent 3 electrons. So -3. And those are your 2 answers. And we're done. Head back to the classroom.